There's never a dull moment when it comes to Minnesota sports. Whether it's on the gridiron,
for the end zone, it's Jefferson who's got the touchdown.
On the court,
Edwards thinking three and popping a three.
On the ice,
it's Kaprizov with an open net, he scores.
Or on the diamond.
Buxton hammers that to left field. Another Minnesota home run.
Whether it's positive,
I think this is a good enough roster to make the playoffs.
Or negative.
He's terrible, awful. Don't get it, don't understand it.
Whether there's optimism,
hey, they might be able to even make it to a conference final.
Or pessimism.
Don't expect me to be super excited. I mean, I don't know. Does this really do much for anybody?
There's always something to chat about.
Shout out to Minnesota Sports Chat. Keep on being elite.
If you're looking for fun, informative discussion on all things Minnesota sports, you've come to the right place. This is Minnesota Sports Chat. And now, here's your host, Ross Brendel.
Yeah, it is Minnesota Sports Chat. Quick scan of my notes, edition number 153 of the soon-to-be award-winning Minnesota Sports Chat. Judd Zulgad in just moments on the Vikings, some Gopher hoops and hockey, maybe a few other topics in between as well. A reminder, please rate and review Minnesota Sports Chat on Apple and Spotify. If you are listening to Minnesota Sports Chat in the SKOR North Taxi Squad feed, I do encourage you to find Minnesota Sports Chat wherever it is that you get podcasts and make sure you subscribe that way. But no matter how you are listening, I certainly appreciate it. And please tell your family and friends all about Minnesota Sports Chat. My thanks as well to Beans Coffee Company for partnering with this show and getting behind it. Please, please, please make sure you subscribe to their email newsletter so you know all about everything that's happening at Beans Coffee Company, including new releases, discounts. Use that promo code SportsChat to save a little bit of money at checkout on your bulk order, or even if you're purchasing by the bag. Coffeebybeans.com, coffeebybeans.com, promo code SportsChat for Beans Coffee Company. Mr. Zulgad, how you doing?
What's going on, Roscoe? I'm doing good. How are you?
You know, I am living the dream, mainly because
Nice.
I get to see you off and on each and every week. That's me buttering you up.
Mondays.
Also, great hoodie you're wearing right now.
Oh,
What? Is that a new one?
yeah, it's a new Twins one.
Okay.
Yep. My wife doesn't like it, but it's very comfortable.
What's the pattern? And if you're finding Minnesota Sports Chat on YouTube, you'll see what I'm talking about. Is that like
Yeah.
clouds? What is that?
I have no idea. Yeah, it looks like them. I mean, it's what, dark blue with. Yeah, it's a good question.
It's like
faded-
tie-dye, maybe? Faded
Yeah,
tie-dye?
Yeah. You know what? I think you're right. I think it's tie dye.
I
Very
also,
comfortable. It's very, very comfortable.
I love Judd, and I think I'm just going to stop calling you Judd. I'm just going to start calling you Sports Dad. I love that that's what your handle here on the old video
that's what
setup says, and that's what you are.
Well, and I put that on there, and like during Purple Daily and Mackie and Judd, Declan hides that so you can't see it. But yeah, I just put Sports Dad.
I like to have it up. You just did a good intro for yourself, much better than I did because I didn't even give you one. Judd Zulgad from SKOR North, Mackie and Judd, Purple Daily. You're doing some Vikings writing too, Judd. Do you want to plug that really quickly?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Russ. VikingsWire.com. VikingsWire.com. It's Tyler Fornes, Matt Anderson. It's me. It's a group of about 4 or 5. And the site, thanks to the Vikings, of course, because they're never dull, the site has taken off and is doing some big hits. But yes, I am doing, my columns now have shifted from the old SKORNorth.com to VikingsWire.com. I appreciate you giving me that chance.
Yeah, I finally met Tyler and Matt both in person a few weeks back, actually, over at Thor's place. Well, it must have been about a month and a half ago now that I think about it, because we were watching college football, the big Kansas bowl game against
the big college football guys.
It was a big one. It's so big I don't remember which game it was. I think the Liberty Bowl, maybe. I can't remember. A couple of 6-and-6 squads putting on a show for us. Okay, Sports Dad. Let's start with the Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Judd, I think everybody is, I don't know if ecstatic's the right word, but I think everybody's happy with Brian Flores. Mm-hmm. But humor me with this, okay?
Okay.
I think for one season, Brian Flores is going to be great. I don't know if the defense is going to be great, but if they're going to be bad, at least I think there's a plan. But I also don't think they can be worse than last year. So I think they'll be better. Mm-hmm. But if he does a pretty good job, he's probably only here for a season.
Right.
So to be contrarian or play devil's advocate, is Brian Flores really the right defensive coordinator for the long term? Or is this another sign again from KOC, Kwesi, and the Wilfs? Long term be damned. We're going all in on trying to win again in 2023.
Well, so I get what you're saying, and I don't disagree with it. And yes, I think if Brian Flores has any semblance of success with a defense that was atrocious with Ed Donatel as DC, and furthermore, if his lawsuit against 3 teams in the league goes away, which I think it will by this time next year probably, he's probably one and done. And it would not be ideal if there were other candidates who they could have gotten and they passed over. Ejiro Evero, the guy that I think was their guy. He's the guy that they wanted, released from his contract by Sean Payton, I think on Saturday in Denver. And then a guy who knows O'Connell and Kwesi and who was supposed to talk to the Vikings early this week. And then Evero takes the Carolina job. He also might be in line for a head coach. I don't know that he's the slam dunk that Brian Flores is, though. I think Brian Flores, because he's been there before, actually did a pretty damn good job with the Dolphins. I said exactly what you said, and I don't disagree with it. But once Evero took a job, and once Sean Desai pulled out and said that he was going to either go back to Seattle or focus on the Broncos job, I guess my question is this: what were the choices? Because if Brian Flores had gotten the Cardinals head coaching job, which I'm guessing he was told he wasn't going to, but he supposedly called them on Sunday or Monday and said, I'm not going to go back for a second interview with the Cardinals on Wednesday. If Brian Flores had gotten another job or just declined to take the Vikings job, you would have been left with Mike Pettin, a second list of guys. Right. But my point is, I totally get where you're coming from. And I think Evero was their first choice. But given where they stood on Sunday when Evero, I don't know, sight unseen's probably not fair, but when Evero took the Panthers job, I think Brian Flores became a home run hire because the choices beyond that were not exactly attractive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
So
and
I get your point.
Yeah, and at some point, I mean, you play the hand that you're dealt, and that may have been the hand that they were dealt, which, by the way, it's a pretty good hand to have in your hand. That was a very bad way of putting that, but you know what I mean. When I think of Flores, you think of a guy that blitzes a lot. I think last year, his defense is, or maybe just historically, you might know the number, you might have it in front of you.
The Dolphins 2 years ago, yes, I think, led the league, or they were second.
Yeah, they blitz like 40% of the time. And even if the Vikings chose to blitz 10% of the time next year, that's going to look night and day compared to this past season with Ed Donatel.
Right.
But then I start looking at it, and I know Purple Daily has done a lot of this, so obviously download, subscribe, rate, review Purple Daily as well. When you look at the type of defense that he wants to run, but the players that are currently on the roster, you immediately start thinking, okay, who is Brian going to want back next year?
Yep.
But then also, we don't even need to name names, but what types of players are they going to be looking for in free agency? What types of players can they even afford in free agency?
Yep.
And what types of players might they want to be drafting? But first and foremost, it's the current players on your roster. Now that you know who the defensive coordinator is,
yep,
when you think of those aging players, Judd, who stays and who goes?
I think they'll ask him to take a pay cut, but I think Harrison Smith stays. He is no longer as fast. Obviously, he's 34, or he will be 34, I think, next season. But if you look at what he brings, and if you look at how poorly he was used by Donatel, this is a guy who is most effective when he's allowed to come down into the box, when he is allowed to blitz. And, you know, the whole shell coverage called for the safeties to stay deep, which was ridiculous. So I think Harrison Smith ultimately stays. After that, I think cornerback, and this is the scary thing, and I do think that there's a very good chance that their one significant signing in free agency will be at cornerback, not on the offensive side of the ball. But I think because you need 3 starters there, and I'll explain. Outside corners, yes. But, Shannon Sullivan was not good at the nickel corner, and that is essentially in 2023 a starting job. So I think you'd probably spend on a corner. I think the current corners, Patrick Peterson, who is a free agent, is gone because he is a zone coverage guy. I think he expressed disappointment about Donatel being fired because he liked the system, not because it was good. And the Giants actually, as the Vikings began to play more man late in the season, in the Giants playoff game, Patrick Peterson got picked on more because of that. I think the linebackers both have to be gone. Kendricks and Hicks. It saves you money, and they're slow.
Well, I was just going to say that, Judd, not to cut you off, but they're too slow. I mean, they're slow for almost any system.
Brian Asamoah should have been playing more. And look, he had 27 snaps in the Christmas Eve game against the Giants. His snaps, I think before that Giants game, before we got really late in December, Brian Asamoah had double-digit snaps at linebacker in a game, I think, once. I don't even think he got snaps consistently or at all. I shouldn't say consistently at all until like week 6. So by the time we get to the playoff game, Brian Asamoah, before he got hurt, I think it was on punt coverage in the first half, 0 snaps. That's ridiculous. So I think Brian Asamoah gets a chance to win a job. I think he will make mistakes, but I think he will bring speed, which will help a lot. Dalvin Tomlinson's a free agent. That's a big one because that is a 3-tech spot. Are you going to bring him back? Like, you got to do something there. Danielle Hunter, I think, gets a new contract. Zadarius Smith, you could argue it both ways, but I don't think with where he is health-wise, I don't think that's a deal breaker if you don't bring him back. But, Danielle Hunter, if you look at the advanced metrics and you look at the fact that he had 10.5 sacks, Ross, and you then think about that you didn't see him at times, but yet all of the advanced metrics said he's playing well. I'm trying to think of another guy in town, in sports in this town, who the eye test and the analytics have ever been so far apart. Because I thought at times Danielle Hunter was having a bad year. And you look at PFF, they're like, no, he's not. He was that misused that he still overcame it. But I think he's back. I think the linebackers are gone. I think Harrison Smith is back. And here's what I want to see, though. Day 1 at training camp, Lewis Cine is playing, okay? If Lewis Cine can play, don't give me this. Well, Cam Bynum, he emerged. He's so smart. Lewis Cine should be, if he's anything, and he's a first-round pick, he should be a dream in what this scheme calls for: aggressiveness, speed, hard hitting. So I think you should be set day 1 of training camp. Harrison Smith and Cine at safety.
Yeah, and I think, the injury, when you talk about Cine, obviously that ended up derailing this year, but that had nothing to do with him not playing early.
Correct.
When you look at Booth or Booth Jr., that one to me is a little bit different. You drafted a guy with an injury history, but I think you were going on upside there. But for Booth, I 100% agree with you, Judd. He needs to be playing, and then also go back, and you can do this every year. Look at the 30, 31 guys that went in front of him. Far too many guys played last year and made impacts, and he just didn't for multiple reasons. 1, he was injured. 2, they never put him on the field. Right. So, I think he absolutely has to play. The Danielle Hunter thing is very interesting, Judd, because he had double-digit sacks in a new system. It seemed to be slow to take for him, and they also had him out in coverage. That guy shouldn't be covering anybody. If he has to, there's a mistake, something happens, okay, I get it. But to design plays within your scheme where an elite pass rusher isn't doing what he does best is just stupid. And I don't think that Ed Donatel is dumb. He's had jobs forever in the NFL. But I do think he's stubborn, and it cost him dearly this year.
He didn't know what he was trying to install. And we didn't know that because he came from, and I mean, this goes up to Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell. They assumed that he was going to install the Fangio system. But, keep in mind, he had the DC title in Denver, but that was the equivalent of the guys here that had the DC title with Zimmer. They weren't the defensive coordinators. They were assistants who helped out. So the Donatel hire didn't work. But I think Flores can. And yeah, the issue with if you are going to have Danielle Hunter drop back into coverage, it needs to be a zone blitz where he's replaced by, a safety coming, right? Or a cornerback coming. You can't just have him drop back into coverage. So this was a disaster. The personnel was not great. They need to move on from some of that, but I also think Brian Flores being far more creative. And the nice thing too, Ross, is we know his system. Like with Donatel,
Yes,
we're like,
there's history.
Okay, I assume he's going to do what Fangio did, and then he doesn't. And you're like, what the hell are you doing, dude? 3 years of coaching the Dolphins, that was Flores' baby. That was his defense. And so at least we know, fail or not, that he's going to run what we think he's going to with Donatel. And this is why I would have fired him in November. It became apparent that he was essentially trying to make up what he believed should work and didn't really have a clue what would work.
Yeah, and also Judd, and not to hammer him, he's gone, it's done, it's over with. But you can only try and run your system so long before you realize it's not working, and then you just have to adapt with the talent that you have. And he never wanted. How many times did we hear? It's not necessarily the system, it's the players not adapting to the system. I can't imagine that goes over in the locker room very well. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't think you can say that in today's NFL.
Late in the season, he was still saying it was going to take Danielle Hunter a full year. No, it doesn't. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. If that's the case, then you need to adjust what you are doing. This is not on a guy who had 10.5 sacks and is a multi-time Pro Bowl player. And look, after the Detroit game, at Detroit that the Vikings lost, Ed should have been fired because O'Connell teed off as much as he ever will on anybody publicly. He essentially said, I told him we need to be more aggressive, and Ed did it for a game. And then by the playoffs said the players are taking control. This is going to be great. And of course they got, embarrassed again defensively by Daniel Jones and the Giants, who then got embarrassed by Philadelphia. So yes, I think it's a very good change. And I will say by the time, if they hadn't gotten Brian Flores, I think we'd all be very disgruntled right now because it would be Mike Pettin or a name we had never heard of previously.
Judd, is Harrison Smith, I think I've asked you this before, but if I have, it's been a while. Harrison Smith an NFL Hall of Famer? I think he is. Is he going to be when he hangs it up?
I think he's close, yeah. Like I mean, consider the position, safeties, they're not a slam dunk, but he's close.
He's always around the ball.
You know what's going to hurt him? It's going to hurt him if he doesn't have a ring.
Yeah. You know what, Judd? I'm a faith-believing man. If he plays till he's 150 for the Minnesota Vikings, he might get a Super Bowl ring.
He might get a ring in Baltimore or something at the end. Situational guy. And then if he gets the ring, he's probably in Canton.
Isn't it amazing across all sports how that makes such a huge difference? Maybe some sports more so than others it should, maybe it shouldn't, but it is kind of funny how we tack on these things that, baseball for years, you had to have 500 home runs. Remember, we didn't want to put Fred McGriff in the Hall of Fame because he had 491. And I'm like,
the cheaters came along.
Correct. And then the cheaters came along. One more quick thing on the Vikings, then we'll talk some Gopher sports. You mentioned all the basically defensive coordinators in name only that worked under Mike Zimmer. How involved is Wes Phillips? I get the sense that Wes is actually fairly involved. KOC is still doing the play calling, but I get the sense that Wes is not just a figurehead. Is that fair, or is he basically just kind of there because he's there and you need an offensive coordinator?
No, I think he has input. I think he definitely helps with game planning and things like that. But, it's always questionable, and we don't know when a guy is the assistant and has a title for a coach who does the work, right? Like O'Connell, was McVay's OC, but we all knew McVay ran the show. And so, I don't want to denigrate Wes, but I don't know for sure. The one thing that we know is ordinarily coaches whose expertise is on one side of the ball are control freaks. So I think Wes probably helps. I think Wes probably has suggestions. But do I think if they did disagree that O'Connell defers a lot? Probably not. It's not how football coaches work.
We'll leave it there on the soon-to-be Super Bowl champion Minnesota Vikings. I'll let you decide what soon is. We'll talk some. Let's start with the Gopher Pucksters, Judd. You know, one of my loves, Gopher hockey. And Judd, I am giddy with excitement that the Mooch, to a degree, is back. Mm-hmm. It's back, baby. Mm-hmm. Loud, boisterous crowds. I still see too many empty seats for games that are allegedly sold out. Again, I'll put the plea out there. If you own a company, you have tickets that you're not using, your employees aren't using them, you can find me on Twitter at Brendel Ross. I will gladly go and use your company's seats. Judd, you just don't know with college hockey. I think there are some flaws in this Gopher hockey team that could hurt them come tournament time, mainly size and youth. However, pound for pound, when it comes to talent, I'm not sure there's a more talented team in college hockey. Fair?
I think that's incredibly fair. I think that their high end guys are so high end that I think that's
so fun to watch when they're playing well.
I think that's a very fair statement. And yeah, I mean, the problem, well, good or bad, the issue is probably a better word than problem with the sport is single elimination playoffs, right?
Yep.
You know,
Bob knows that well.
Puck goes off a guy's breezer. It goes in. You lose in overtime. You know, it's not a series, which makes it more difficult. But yes, it does feel like I believe the Michigan State series technically sold out. The Michigan games seem like they were raucous crowds, which is fantastic. And the upper echelon, I'm trying to think of the last time this team had this much talent. And I'm not talking about like, oh, they're good. I'm talking about like NHL ready talent. Brock Faber is, you know who I absolutely love? Snuggerud.
Yeah.
Dave Snuggerud's kid, Jimmy? What a player. What a shot. That first line with Cooley and Snuggerud and Nye. I mean, that's scary stuff, man. I mean, the Toronto fans with Matthew Nye are, salivating. I've seen talk that, the one guy that, you can't put in a trade deadline deal for a Maple Leafs team that's good, really good, and it hasn't won a cup since 1967 is Matthew Nye. So I think your assessment's dead on. It is a really fun, talented team. Now you run into a team, and this team is better than that one, but was it 2014 or so that they went and played in the Frozen Four in Philly?
Yes.
And played Union, which was full of like 25-year-olds.
Yeah, that was the national championship game.
Yeah, and I was there, and they literally kicked their ass. Like I'm not talking about scoring wise, that too. I'm talking about they kicked their butt. So your assessment might be right, but this is a fun team, and I really hope that Bob can win this year because I mean, poor Bob's been through so much.
Yes, yeah,
off the ice especially. But I mean, he's a good coach. I love what he's done. It would be really fun to see this team end a drought that's now at what, Roscoe, 18 years, 19 years?
Yeah, 2003. So, I mean, are we pushing 20 years technically? Yep. And to your point, Judd, Bob, just seems like a good guy. He's good in the community. By all accounts, he's good with his players. He's had a lot of personal tragedy. But to what you said, the guy's put in the work. I mean, he had teams at St. Cloud that probably should have won national championships and didn't because of what you talked about. Maybe some puck luck, the 1 versus 16 year where they were won. He lost to the number 16, which can easily happen to anybody. But it's happened to him more so than a lot of guys. But it was good to see them make that jump to the Frozen Four last year. And I think a guy like him, there's certain quarterbacks in the NFL as their career starts to wind down, you do kind of cheer for if they don't have a championship. I always felt that way about Phillip Rivers. I always thought it would have been nice to see him win one. I think it would have been nice to see Matt Ryan win one, and that's probably not going to happen. But Bob, for a coach, is kind of in that same category in college hockey, just like Bruce Boudreau in the NHL. But I love talking Gopher hockey, so thank you for humoring me there and making me feel good. Because now the negativity. I am never going to run a guy out of town who takes over a program after 2 years, even if he was handed, in this case, Ben Johnson, even if he was handed a team that went to the NCAA tournament every year, I would still give you probably 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say all that to say this. If the Gopher basketball team doesn't win minimum 5 conference games next year, probably 6 or 7, Ben Johnson will not be given a 4th year at the University of Minnesota. He has to already know that by now. And Judd, you can already see it amongst the crowd. If you're not a Gopher basketball diehard, nobody's going and nobody cares. It is that apathetic right now. And it is, Judd, I don't love ripping on college players, but at this point now they're semi-professionals, especially with NIL. Yeah. It's a really bad product right now. Really bad. Really bad.
It's really, really sad because I go back to, so I of course grew up and still love the sport of hockey. But going back to 1989, I remember starting to regularly go to the barn. I was 19, okay? And that was the year that Clem's Gophers started to take off. And they beat Marcus Liberty and #1 Illinois in a game in which for the first time I said, and I've said this for years. I don't know, I still do, but I said it for years. When it's full and rocking, the barn is the best venue in this town. Yeah. Unbelievable.
It's fun.
And look, I mean, this is not a Ben Johnson thing. This program in the last 20 plus years has had a lot of downs post Clem. I mean, there have been some, there's been some fun, but a lot of downs.
And even before that, Judd, historically, they make the NCAA tournament about once every 4 years.
Yeah.
So you do need to have, and I'm guilty of this too, but you do need to have a bit of an understanding of your lot in life. I'm not saying you can be a tournament team or that you should be a tournament team every 4 years, that it shouldn't be better. But what I am saying is right now, historically, that's what it is. So you do have to view it with those glasses on to the best of your ability.
Now, but here's why I'm out. And I'm not just out on the Gophers, college basketball. All right. The NILs, according to Patrick Royce, the Gophers have 0 NIL money coming in. There's one kid, the transfer, I think he's out hurt, transfer from one of the Dakota schools who had an
Parker
NIL.
Fox.
Yes, Parker Fox had a deal that he brought with him. But as far as the money coming in for players, 0. And the other thing is with the ability to transfer now and the ability to basically play for 8 years or so, I have no hope because, okay, let's say you fire Ben. #1, if you don't write a big check to get a big time coach, you got no chance. Even if you do, who stays? Like Ben Johnson, who I have no reason not to believe that he's a really good guy. Okay. I don't know a thing about him, but the things I've read is he's a really good guy. But when you look at the amount of kids when he got that job who jumped ship immediately, I don't know if they gave him a chance or not. They jumped ship. And then right now, what do we hear, Roscoe? Well, wait for the 2 kids coming in next year. The recruits are going to start to come in. And that's all well and good. But guess what? They might get here for a year and say, hold on a second. This isn't what I signed up for. And I'm out of here. And then they can leave and immediately be eligible. My point is, like college basketball, because of this, has largely just flat out lost me. But when it comes to the Gophers, tell me how you're going to change it, because kids are going to either go pro, if the Evans kid from California is as good as they say, he might go pro. But let's say he's not. You think he's going to sit here for 3 or 4 years while this thing turns? Or do you think he's going to go to a school like a Duke or something after a year and say, sorry, Ben, this wasn't what I expected. So I'm out.
Well, and Judd, on the Christie and the Evans kids coming in next year, who by and large are allegedly really good recruits. Do you know at this point, we've even exchanged texts on this, can either one of us say definitively if we think Ben Johnson can really coach?
No.
So
that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
I have no
so
idea.
so that's, I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying I don't know if we know if he can. Boy, I've had some real word salads this podcast. The other thing too, Judd, is this recruiting class, albeit not as good as the Christie and Evans kid next year, this recruiting class was supposed to be pretty good. And I get they're freshmen and they're all playing way too much. I get that. But they all look lost. Almost everyone outside of Pharrell Payne looks lost. And then you factor in Jamison Battle and Dawson Garcia. I text my buddy all the time. Hi, Brandon. He's a big Gopher basketball guy, season ticket holder. I don't know what they're doing on offense. They don't even run an offense.
Right.
What are they doing half the time? I don't know.
And that's the same complaint that I saw with Patino as well. Dawson Garcia is on his third team, okay? Third program. You're not on your third program if you're really good. Like, you are bouncing around. He is the equivalent of what we're now going to see, which is college journeyman, which is really, really pathetic.
Yeah, it's really sad if you think about it.
Because it feels like he's 40 now. But the reality is this, too. So for the two recruits coming in, let's say they're damn good. If they don't declare for the draft, all right, there is very little chance that those two recruits are going to fill up the barn next winter. So after playing in a building that I love dearly when it's filled, but that is a dank, cold building when it's not, after playing a year and teams start to recruit you because you're going to get re-recruited, right?
Yep.
Are you telling
with cash offers?
Exactly. With NIL money. So are you telling me that when a school comes to me and says, hey, Dennis Evans, look, fine choice, you tried. But we here at Duke can give you a lot more. And by the way, they actually can. Are you going to stay here? Like, that's my question is how does the cycle end in 2023?
I mean, you might stay, but I think the odds are much greater that you go. On the collective, and I think we'll leave it here because I promise to be very time sensitive with you. On the NIL, I actually thought when this started, I thought there was two ways that this could go. One, it's not going to change much. That was one thought. The rich are going to get richer. The football comparison. The Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Georgias, they're just going to stay the same because they have all the money. Nothing will really change. You can make that argument, okay? But then I also made the argument the other way. If you're Minnesota and prior to NIL, all we've ever heard from multiple coaches is this is a great place to come play, Fortune 500 companies. Yep. The minute you leave, you'll have a job.
Yep.
Okay, well, we have an NIL collective here. Why are we not going to the 3Ms, the Land O'Lakes, the Best Buys, the Targets, and saying, hey, give us $2 million, give us $5 million. Why are we not blatantly asking these companies for money and dumping it into that collective so the University of Minnesota, which again has all these more Fortune 500s per capita than any other place in the country, if my memory serves me right. Who needs to be in charge at the athletic department to put this together and go beg for that money? Because there is a world in name, image, and likeness, Judd, where I think Gophers athletics could thrive. But somebody has to put that together and beg and plead and get this money.
Who's to say they're not, though? Like, that's the thing is, yes, there are a lot of rich people and rich companies, and this is a white-collar town. But all of that being said, here's your problem. The Gopher sports program on the pecking order in this town is very, very low. So like if I'm, if I'm Best Buy, right? It's not like we're in Alabama. It's not like we're in Gainesville, where that's
Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah, where that's the game, where the Gophers would be the game. Here I'm investing in different things. I might be investing in different programs. So I wouldn't assume that the Gophers and their athletic supporters aren't going to these people. I'm curious if these people, rightfully so, are like, yeah, I'm not going to do a drop in the bucket to keep a basketball player or something like that when I can invest in different things. And by the way, if you came through with a massive investment in Gopher basketball, what's it really going to get you? One day of publicity?
Well, I think you have to factor in other things too, right? Like your $5 million is also getting you your logo on the court. It's got to be more than just you're buying goodwill from a kid.
I mean, we've sort of got that, right?
Yeah.
We've sort of got that with Huntington Bank, which is the old TCF Bank. I think you put it perfectly, which is Gopher sports for the most part is so off the radar because this town is so big. It's got every professional sport, and the reality is this. As far as the sports fans go, there's only so much attention to go around here. Like the Vikings are king, and after that, I mean, I don't think the Twins are in exceptionally good shape with their fans. Do you?
No, not at all.
And they're a professional baseball team.
They've lost Declan, I believe. That's how. That's how.
I'm just saying it's a very interesting topic, but I do think that the direction college basketball has gone has done everything it possibly can to alienate the type of support that you're talking about, other than that diehard old school Gopher fan.
Well, and not only when you say old school Gopher fan, it's right in that sentence, old.
Yep.
You know, I think
that's been Gopher forever.
Huntington Bank Stadium, Judd, I've noticed it in the last decade. It has turned. Is it where it needs to be? No, but I think you've probably noticed it's a younger, more youthful group than it ever has been, but it's still probably not as good as it needs to be. I lied. I got two very quick things for you. Classic Ross. Tell me, is Matt Dumba going to be traded?
I think he will be. I think Brock Faber, a right shot defenseman from the Gophers, will, once that season is done, join the Wild and step in immediately. But yes, I think they will get what they can, because he's not coming back, and I don't know that he's doing enough to justify allowing him to walk. Now here's the big if, though, if they can get something for him. His value is very low. So don't assume that you would get much. And it wouldn't be a detriment to keep him around, I don't think, because, I think his teammates really like him and he wears a letter. But all of that being said, I think if they can leverage something for him, he will be traded.
Here's a very random question for you. I don't know why I thought of this, and if you have no answer, that's entirely fine. After searching for literal years, Judd, I think I've talked about this on the podcast, one of my nerddom things that I do, and they have no value, so it's literally a waste of money. I love collecting pocket schedules. Okay.
Oh yeah.
It took me years to find it, but I finally found a Minnesota Fighting Pike pocket schedule, and I got it. And I got it for like $5 American with shipping.
Yep.
What can you tell me? What do you remember about the Minnesota Fighting Pike? Do you remember anything?
Oh heck yeah! First of all, I still have, and it was one season, right?
Yeah, just one season.
I still have the media guide.
Yes.
Second of all, I covered a game against, I want to say it was Orlando. I freelanced it for a paper down there. And so I covered it. I covered one game. I think I went to one game, sat in the press box at Target Center with the hot tub in the end zone. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Ricky Foggy was the quarterback. Of course, the former Gopher great who was outstanding when I was a kid.
Do you remember the place kicker?
Was it Mike Vanderjack?
It was. You know, it was Peyton Manning's liquored up idiot kicker, Mike Vanderjack.
Who went on? Who, by the way, with the Colts was outstanding.
Yes.
Yep. In
Good.
fact,
I love this poll. Great. I'm glad I asked
Roscoe, you. Check this out. How about this one? This is
that Minnesota Kicks?
It's a Minnesota Kicks season or a ticket brochure. Back when you had the stadium layout right there.
Oh, look at that.
You've got the savings. Let's see here. Tickets were
I don't even want to know. It's going to make me sad.
Buy one of our new 8-game mini seasons. You get it?
For like what?
56, 40, or $30.
You can get to 8 games for $30.
A season ticket, just a normal one, the best seat, $100.80, down to $54. An individual ticket, the most expensive at Metropolitan Stadium for a Kicks game, was $7.
I think
and there's a schedule right there.
I think you'd be happy to know, Judd, I do have a couple Minnesota Kicks schedules. Also, I know you're a big lacrosse guy. You were a big Minnesota Swarm guy, weren't you?
Well, Phil and I were part of the they sponsored us, I guess.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't even remember that.
Yeah,
great.
In fact, we were.
Did you get a jersey?
Yeah, I think we did. And we went to midfield one time before a game and were introduced. No one had any clue who we were, but it was great.
Yeah, I don't think not to like put stereotypes or generalizations on people. That crowd, probably not a lot of sports overlap. It was
families because it was relatively cheap and the score would be like 21-16.
Yeah.
So it was great.
Judd, you're the best. I really appreciate it. Thanks for doing this. We didn't even get to what I wanted to talk about, but I'll give you 30 seconds.
Okay.
I actually really have enjoyed season 22 of Law & Order, and I'm going to do my best reenactment of my favorite scene. I'm going to play two people here, and I'm going to clarify who I'm playing, okay?
Okay.
At first, I'm Hugh Dancy to Jack McCoy. Hugh Dancy, of course, plays Nolan Price, one of the prosecutors.
Yep.
He looks at Jack and says, Jack, we will get a conviction. You have my word on it. And Jack says, I don't care about your word, Nolan. I care about the conviction. Such a great, it was one of the episodes where Jack didn't look half dead. And I say that lovingly because he's 81 years old.
He's looked a little bit better. So here's I've watched about 3 episodes. I think I watched the last one on my DVR a couple days ago. My assessment is this. I think the cops now are pretty good. The new cop works much better with Burn Notice guy than Anthony Anderson did.
Burn Notice guy.
I like the cops way more. I don't think they're perfect, but I think that tandem or that duo is good.
Yeah.
Hugh Dancy and his ADA partner drive me crazy.
See, I think Hugh's okay. I think they're actually okay, but what I think you and I agree on is they ask him to get too personal and let personal stuff affect how they want to try a case. And you and I know that's not how Law and Order works. That's also not how it works in the real world.
Exactly.
And
she's always trying to she's gotten her way on stuff. It's like, this would never happen. Price's character, what I loved about McCoy and Schiff was Schiff at times would say, no, you can't do right.
Yeah.
McCoy now objects to
what gives in.
Price wants to do, but he never says no.
Yeah, he's a pushover.
And the other thing too is, and I've seen this twice. I think there was an episode last year where at the end or at some point in time, Price's character sees a guy get shot who just testified. And in the last one I saw, he goes to a guy's house to tell him about the unfortunate verdict, and the guy's ODing.
Yes,
okay?
yes.
The ADAs aren't doing that. Yeah. Like I got to go talk to him. Oh my God, he's dying. 911, we need an ambulance. That's not how this works. How many times did Ben Stone, when Ben Stone resigned, one of the great episodes was he was informed his witness had been killed. That's how it works. You're not there to see it. Like the cops, I get, right? But it's like Hugh Dancy's character is the man about town. Oh, you got shot. Call an ambulance.
Well, the beauty of Law and Order always is they make it out like that's their only case. Then they're just waiting for the next one.
I know. That's always been that way.
A real DA, a real prosecutor has hundreds of cases at one time. Burn Notice guy, Jeffrey Donovan, I think he's really settled into his role. He's less rigid. And I do owe you an apology. Then we'll get out of here. You can actually hear the music playing. Judd, you were right. You are 100% right. The reason why I thought Serena Sutherland was good at her job was because she was hot. I've rewatched a few episodes in the last couple of weeks.
She wasn't good. Yeah.
Oh, she's terrible.
Yeah, I know.
And you're right. You can literally tell they just gave her the line, and then she just reads the line. Oh, you are right, Jack. Yeah. Why don't we go talk to... Yeah, she's terrible. So you were right on that. I apologize.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
She's still gorgeous. She's still gorgeous.
Well, yeah, didn't say she wasn't.
That's Judd Zulgad, at J Zulgad on the Twitter machine. I almost made up a podcast for you. I don't know why that was. Mackie and Judd, Purple Daily, parts in between as well. J Zulgad on the Twitter machine. Thanks, Judd.
Thank you, Roscoe.
That'll do it for edition number 153 of Minnesota Sports Chat. Thank you so much for listening. Please rate and review kindly. Tell your friends all about Minnesota Sports Chat. I'm back next week. We'll talk mainly, exclusively hockey with Jesse Pierce from the Bar Down Beauties pod, but also of Purple Dailies Before We Die. That's next week on Minnesota Sports Chat. I'm Ross Brendel. Thank you so much for listening.